He should step aside and let someone else lead. You can't keep ruling us by force forever. Let someone else prove what they can do.
Togo is on fire. Its people are rising, and the president just rewrote the rules to stay in power forever. But how did one man turn a democracy into a dynasty overnight? Let's find out. It didn't start with a speech. It didn't start with a coup. It started with a single quiet oath behind closed parliamentary doors, a moment most citizens didn't even see live. On June 24, 2025, President Faure Gnassingbé stood before a newly restructured parliament and swore an oath, not as the President of Togo, but as the President of the Council of Ministers. A title unfamiliar to the public, but powerful enough to redraw the political architecture of the nation. There were no campaign rallies, no referendum, no vote from the people. Just ink on paper, passed swiftly by lawmakers loyal to the ruling party, turning what used to be a republic into something far more dangerous, a dynasty with legal teeth. And that's when the silence broke. 2 days later, on June 26th, the streets of Lomé began to flood, not with water, but with fury, not with ceremony, but with defiance. The capital, often known for its humid calm and ocean breeze, turned into a boiling point of collective outrage. Tires were set ablaze, makeshift barricades went up, and slogans scrawled in red paint appeared overnight. "You can't crown yourself king." The shift was rapid, almost unnatural. A city that had long been quiet under pressure suddenly roared back to life. This was not politics as usual. The newly minted Council of Ministers post, which Gnassingbé now occupies, is a direct transplant from the kind of governance found in authoritarian systems, centralized, unaccountable, and immune to public opinion. Unlike the ceremonial presidency handed off to another figure to give the illusion of change, the council's role holds the real authority. And most crucially, it comes with no term limit, allowing the same man from the same family to rule Togo indefinitely without ever facing the ballot box again. In the eyes of many Togolese, this wasn't a clever legal reform, it was a hostile takeover. By the evening of June 26th, videos were circulating online. Young men and women, faces wrapped in scarves, hoisting signs that read, "We are not slaves," and 60 years of one name. In Bay, a known opposition stronghold in Lomé, groups of students tore down billboards showing the president's face. Elsewhere, entire neighborhoods began gathering, chanting under moonlight, organizing without clear leaders, just a shared sense of betrayal. What's striking is not just the speed of the protests, but their spontaneity. No political parties were driving the mobilization, no scheduled national strike, no grand speeches or televised opposition announcements. This was raw, organic rage, pouring out of a generation born and raised under the weight of the Gnassingbé name. Many of them were children when Faure Gnassingbé took power in 2005. Some weren't even born when his father ruled with an iron fist before that. Now they've reached adulthood, and they've had enough. The protests didn't stay in Lomé for long. Reports soon emerged from Sokodé, Kara, and Séville, cities that had once been politically dormant, where crowds gathered with similar calls for change. It was no longer just about the capital. The entire country was trembling. And yet, what made this moment feel especially volatile was what didn't happen. There was no press conference from the president, no attempt to explain the reforms, no national address, just silence from the palace and boots on the ground. The vacuum of dialogue created a breeding ground for suspicion. Was this planned long ago? Did international allies know? Were lawmakers bought or coerced? The questions piled up, unanswered. All the while, tanks rolled down city streets and riot police tightened their formation. Inside homes, families debated whether to join the demonstrations or stay indoors. On encrypted apps, university students shared maps of safe routes and lists of legal helplines. And on social media, at least while it was still available, hashtags like #StopTheCouncil and #NotMyLeader began trending across the francophone internet. One protester captured the moment best in a voice message that quickly went viral before the blackout hit. "He didn't take power. He stole our future." It was clear that this wasn't just resistance to a law. It was resistance to a legacy. And now that the first spark has lit the fire, the question isn't whether the people will stay angry. It's what the government is willing to do to put that fire out. The streets were speaking, but the regime didn't answer with words. It answered with force. Within hours of the first citywide protests on June 26th, Togo's government activated a playbook it knows all too well. Except this time, it didn't just aim to control a crowd. It aimed to crush a movement before it could even take shape. In the early hours of June 27th, military trucks rolled out from bases on the outskirts of Lomé. Not ordinary police vans, not crowd control units, but armored personnel carriers, mounted with surveillance gear and reinforced with riot teams trained for urban suppression. This wasn't law enforcement. It was a preemptive occupation. Their first target? Bé, the historic heart of anti-regime sentiment. Locals say security forces moved street by street, not just dispersing gatherings but entering homes without warrants. Residents were yanked out of their bedrooms. Phones were seized. Parents were beaten in front of their children. Eyewitness accounts describe a campaign of intimidation designed to paralyze entire communities, not just protest leaders. But this wasn't limited to Lomé. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. In Kara, ironically the president's hometown, military presence tripled overnight. Checkpoints were established at every exit. Public transport was suspended. Schools were abruptly closed under the vague label of public safety precautions. The message was clear. If rebellion was contagious, the state was going to quarantine the country. Yet while the trucks moved outside, the regime was also busy inside. Inside servers, inside networks, inside digital spaces that had become the last refuge for organizers. On June 28th, internet service across much of the country dropped without warning. First, it was mobile data, then Wi-Fi, then SMS delays. By midday, most social media platforms, Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, had either slowed to a crawl or stopped working altogether. A digital blackout had descended. The government issued no formal announcement. But cybersecurity researchers quickly traced the shutdown to state-controlled network hubs, confirming what most Togolese already suspected. The blackout was not an accident. It was a strategy. Because in 2025, revolution doesn't live in back rooms. It lives in group chats. But the shutdown only deepened the paranoia. In the absence of information, rumors flooded the streets. Some believed foreign mercenaries had landed. Others whispered about mass arrests in undisclosed detention centers. With every unanswered question, fear grew, and with fear came silence. Entire neighborhoods that had been alive with chants the night before fell quiet, not because they gave up, but because they didn't know who was watching. Still, the government didn't stop there. Reports surfaced of individuals being arrested simply for possessing protest posters. Street vendors with anti-government slogans on their phones were detained. University lecturers who had shared critical commentary online were invited to police stations and never came out the same. And yet, the regime overreached in ways that exposed its weakness. By cracking down so hard, so fast, it inadvertently confirmed what the protesters had claimed all along, that this was not reform. It was a hostile consolidation of power. That this wasn't democracy. It was autocracy wrapped in legal robes. The government wanted control. What it showed was fear. International media began picking up the story. Satellite images revealed military mobilizations. Diaspora groups launched campaigns online, translating raw video footage and testimonies into French, English, and German. Suddenly, the regime's blackout wasn't hiding the story. It was amplifying it. Even as soldiers blocked off physical roads, the protest message slipped through borders. The intensity of the state's response also raised questions about what it fears most. Is it the loss of power? The loss of international legitimacy? Or something more fragile? The loss of fear itself among the people? Because what happens when a regime that feeds on silence hears the crowd roar and realizes the volume won't go down? And now that the government has chosen suppression over dialogue, force over compromise, one question begins to emerge from behind the tear gas and broken glass. If the people won't retreat, how far is the regime willing to go to hold on? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. By the time the last smoke canister had hissed out and the boots had retreated into the shadows, something much deeper than tear gas lingered in the air, a reckoning that had been waiting decades to erupt. Because the real question isn't why people protested on June 26th. The real question is how it didn't happen sooner. Togo's unrest wasn't born in 2025. It was born in living rooms where unemployed graduates sit idle with diplomas that lead nowhere. It was born in market stalls where mothers couldn't afford palm oil. It was born in rural villages that haven't seen electricity since independence. The constitutional reform may have been the spark, but the fuel had been stockpiling for years. At the center of this frustration is a simple truth. The Gnassingbé dynasty promised progress. What people got was economic paralysis dressed up as stability. Togo's GDP growth has hovered around 5% in recent years, but the numbers on paper don't match life on the ground. Yes, roads have been built. Yes, new buildings line the skyline of Lomé. But ask the average citizen, and they'll tell you. The wealth never trickled down. It got stuck in ministerial offices, in padded contracts, in the hands of people who never wait in line for petrol. Young people especially have been pushed to the edge. With over 60% of Togo's population under 25, the country is sitting on a demographic powder keg. Every year, thousands graduate from universities into job markets that barely exist. Most end up in the informal sector, selling airtime, doing motorcycle taxi runs, or waiting tables for pennies. This causes a sense of betrayal that runs deep. Many of the protesters taking to the streets today are second-generation victims of a system that rewarded loyalty over merit, silence over truth. Their parents lived through Eyadema's era, an era of military rule, secret prisons, and political exile. And now they watch as their children are expected to bow before the same family, dressed in new titles but preaching the same script. But unlike their parents, this generation isn't afraid of ghosts. They grew up on the internet. They've seen what real accountability looks like in other countries. They know how to organize, how to record abuse, how to amplify messages globally in real time. And more importantly, they have nothing to lose. That's what makes this uprising different from previous ones. It's not led by the old opposition parties. It's not a movement with a single face or ideology. It's a collective exhaustion across age groups, classes, and regions. From the frustrated middle-class merchant to the underpaid teacher, from the village schoolchild to the overworked urban nurse, the uprising has no singular voice because the suffering has been universal. Then there's the question of identity, how a nation sees itself when its entire post-independence history has been shaped by one name. For many Togolese, their own country feels borrowed, inherited by a political dynasty that never truly passed the torch to the people. In this light, the protests are not just about power, they're about dignity, about reclaiming ownership of a nation whose destiny has been outsourced to family interests for generations. And let's not forget the psychological toll. Living under surveillance, under censorship, under laws designed to protect the powerful instead of the people, it wears down a society. You stop dreaming, you stop planning, you live day to day. For many, hitting the streets wasn't a political decision. It was a mental and emotional release, a final gasp of agency before surrender. Even the elders, once seen as the regime's silent partners, are beginning to question things. Religious leaders have issued cautious statements calling for restraint, but in private, many are said to sympathize with the protesters. Behind closed doors, the words being whispered are no longer, "How do we survive this?" but, "How much longer must we pretend this is normal?" The regime may have control of the army. It may control the courts and the national broadcaster. But what it's lost is far more dangerous: the people's willingness to play along. And now that this emotional dam has broken, the real risk for the regime isn't just resistance. It's that a population that has stopped fearing you is a population that's ready to bury you. The chants echoing through the streets of Lomé aren't staying within Togo's borders. They're bouncing across West Africa, landing like sparks on dry terrain. Because while the Togolese protests are national in scale, the tremors they've triggered are continental in consequence. Togo may be small, but the questions it's forcing onto the global stage are enormous. What does democracy mean in a region ruled by generals and dynasties? How long can young populations tolerate leaders who treat the constitution like a family heirloom? And when a people rise without permission, who stands with them? The region is watching, and some are sweating. In neighboring countries like Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, and Cameroon, the ruling elites are paying close attention. All three nations have either tinkered with term limits or flirted with power extensions in recent years. Leaders like Paul Biya and Alassane Ouattara know the playbook Faure Gnassingbé just used, because they've edited it themselves. Now, Togo's explosion threatens to expose just how fragile these so-called stable regimes truly are. If a dynastic president in Lomé can face open rebellion over a silent signature, then what's to stop a similar spark in Abidjan, Yaoundé, or Cotonou? The psychology of suppression is regional, and so is the fear of collapse. But this isn't just unsettling governments, it's energizing civilians. From Ghana to Senegal to Niger, social media has lit up with messages of solidarity. Activists are resharing videos from the protests with hashtags like Togo Revolt, Dynasty Must Fall, and Africa is Awake. What's happening is more than sympathy, it's recognition. The young people in the streets of Lomé look exactly like the ones in Dakar, Abuja, and Bamako. Frustrated, underemployed, disrespected, and determined. The visual vocabulary of Togo's uprising, burning tires, spray-painted slogans, raised fists, has become a regional language of rebellion. And in a digital age, even a blackout can't mute it. Diaspora communities have stepped in, uploading footage, translating calls to action, and lobbying foreign governments to break their silence. But that silence, from the so-called champions of democracy in the West, has been deafening. The European Union issued a brief statement expressing concern and urging restraint. The African Union offered its usual diplomatic neutrality. And France, Togo's longtime patron, has tiptoed around the issue with surgical vagueness. It's a silence that speaks volumes. For decades, France maintained a quiet but firm hand in Togo's affairs, supporting the Gnassingbé dynasty in exchange for military access, economic partnerships, and regional loyalty. Now, as the house catches fire, Paris seems more afraid of losing its old guard than standing with the people demanding freedom. It's not just moral failure, it's strategic blindness. Because the longer Western allies back stability over sovereignty, the more they alienate the very populations they claim to protect. When the youth see Macron shaking hands with Faure, but ignoring videos of soldiers beating civilians, they understand the message. Our suffering is tolerable if our regime plays by Western rules. But regimes aren't the only ones under pressure. Regional organizations like ECOWAS, which have already faced credibility crises over recent coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Guinea, are now stuck. Having previously suspended military governments for undemocratic takeovers, what do they say when an elected president rewrites the rules without a gun, but with the same effect? To call out Faure Gnassingbé would be to admit that civilian leaders can kill democracies just as efficiently as soldiers. But to remain silent is to confirm the suspicion that ECOWAS is more interested in appearances than accountability. And then there's the danger of copycats. If Gnassingbé survives this revolt and solidifies his grip, it sets a dangerous precedent. Other leaders may take note. Why risk a coup when you can simply remodel the constitution, change your title, and rule indefinitely under legal cover? The playbook doesn't just survive, it evolves. But there's another possibility. That's what's happening in Togo becomes a blueprint for citizens instead. A manual for how to confront legal tyranny with raw people power. That the images of unarmed youth defying armored trucks inspire a region into resistance, not resignation. And that's what makes this moment so volatile. It's not just a domestic rebellion. It's a regional test of power, of people, of principle. Do you think locals would win? Or will Togo be enslaved by this rule? Let us know in the comments section what should be done. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.